Hello, Fremont.Church family. I just want to check in with a missional equipping video. And, as we do, we just like these short snippets to remind us of, what we've committed to as we live on mission with Jesus. And so this week I want to talk about something called the conversation quadrant. And it's not like some sort of math formula or anything like that. It's just a helpful reminder of what relationships are like. It's a way to keep it simple in terms of how do we be in relationship with people in a way that honors God and blesses them. And so here's the conversation quadrant. You see this movement from casual to meaningful, from meaningful to spiritual, and from spiritual to discovery. And I want to talk a little bit about that movement of conversation and the movement of relationship, because that's really what this is about. A lot of times when we think about conversations that are, gospel-centered conversations or helping people to connect with who Jesus is, we think of him only in those terms of those spiritual conversations that, a lot of times we hear the word evangelism, and there's many evangelism programs that are meant to be like very concise conversations that help people kind of go, who aren't on Team Jesus, become a part of Team Jesus. And there's all sorts of different pros and cons to that type of thing. And I would just say, I don't want to get in a whole thing of critiquing all of that so much as I wonder, does it work? Especially in our context, because in the Silicon Valley context that we're in, the majority of people do not think religion is an important part of their life. And many come from places all around the world with different religious backgrounds or no religious background at all. And so my primary critique of those evangelism type of programs is they assume a shared religious language or some basic religious concepts that are a jumping off point that actually aren't there. There's a lot more groundwork that needs to be laid before any of those things even make sense. So all of that to say, I think the conversation quadrant helps us to think in terms not in evangelistic conversations, but in being in relationship with people. And the reason I frame it this way is because I think it's really important, not just that people understand the ideas or ideals or basic concepts of Christianity. I think it's important they experience those things, that they're not these lofty ideas, but they're actually something that are embodied and can be lived out. So we think of the conversation quadrant almost in terms of a relational quadrant. Where are we at in this friendship? How comfortable are we together? How committed to this friendship are we? And so when that first starts, it's casual, right? You're talking about, this is what I do for a living, or this is some of my hobbies, or this is where I go to school, or this is the football team I cheer for, or whatever, right? Like some of that basic stuff that's, it speaks a little bit to who you are, but it doesn't get down to what really matters to you. And just over time and over, sharing quality time with people, you're going to have meaningful conversations. And those meaningful conversations are going to look like, here's what's really important to me. Here's what the center of my heart is. Here's what I'm passionate about. Here's the thing that excites me. Here are the things that frustrate me, whatever, right? And you get to know people on a deeper level. And one of the things that I think is important for us as believers to know that is, if Jesus is the most important thing in our life, it shouldn't be shocking to people that kind of comes out a little bit. For me, that sort of looked like sometimes, I have had conversations with friends where there's a mercy and justice issue that's really important to them, and it's also really important to me. And what I realized in the middle of the conversation, and I'm not trying to force a spiritual conversation on them, it's just part of who I am and why I care about what I care about. It's like, oh, Jesus was passionate about that too. In fact, he said this, and that's it. It's just a simple statement that comes naturally out of my life. It's not something I'm enforcing. I'm not trying to say now it's time for a spiritual conversation, right? But I'm just sharing what's meaningful to me, and opening up space for people to share what's meaningful to them. But a lot of times the question comes, okay, well, that's one way of taking a conversation from meaningful to spiritual. And what I would say is we don't take conversations from meaningful to spiritual. That came out of just something meaningful to me, but also I would just suggest as you're sharing what's meaningful to you, it's going to become obvious that Jesus is meaningful to you, right? It might come up in conversation. Hey, what'd you do yesterday? Oh, I was at the diaper drive at my church, and we were just handing out diapers. It's an amazing thing where we get to bless the community and just, help take care of some of the needs that are out there. Or something like that. It's going to become apparent to people that your faith is important to you, right? And so oftentimes that will come with questions. I almost never bring up spiritual conversations with people. I wait for the invitation to have those conversations when somebody asks me a question. Because again, I don't think it's helpful to enforce a spiritual conversation on someone. If we're not sure they're ready for that or wanting that, I think it's important to wait for that invitation and that question to come. And that may not seem like it's urgent enough for some people, but I do think that ultimately we're meant to be in deep relationships and friendships with people, and we're to embody our faith through the way that we show up for people and love people. And then the words that we say will mean something really deep because they've already experienced the love of Jesus before we tell them about the love of Jesus. So as those things sort of naturally come up and the questions sort of naturally come, as that happens more and more often, I think then is the time where you can say, hey, we've had a lot of really cool spiritual conversations, but I don't necessarily want you to take my word for it. I think the whole point the whole thing I'm committed to is Jesus. It's all about Jesus. And so if you're interested, we can just do a Bible study. I'm not trying to enforce anything on you. I'm not trying to pretend like I've got all the answers. I just, if you want to get to know Jesus and what was important to him, let's just read through one of these Gospels. Let's go through, the book of Mark and look at what he did, look at what he said, look at what he cares about, and then just talk about it. And we'll go from there, It may sound intimidating or it may sound like a deep commitment, but I do think that's part of discipleship. So we go deep and wide with people. One of my favorite pastor theologian guys was Eugene Peterson, and he called it a long obedience in the same direction. Just showing up for people, being committed to people, the way that Jesus has showed up for us and been committed to us, and living out our faith in such a way that it brings questions, and then just being prepared to, open up the Bible and show people who Jesus is. So that's the conversation quadrant. Maybe now would be a good time to just stop and pray and think about the people that God's put in your life or put on your heart. Think, where am I on this with them? What's our conversation level? And that's not hey, you better race to the next one so much, just to be in that place and be praying for them and just know that God has put you in their life for a reason, to be a blessing. And so just maybe take now as a good time to just pray for them and pray for your next conversation. So that's what we've got. That discovery conversation we talk about is ultimately leading to Discovery Bible Study, and I believe our next video is going to be from Pastor Will, who's going to talk about Discovery Bible Study, which is awesome. And so it's something anybody can do, and I would encourage you to be on the lookout for that video.